The Legacy of Ravensworth Part 1. The weight of whispers. Agnes Periwinkle had seen things. 25 years as a night nurse at Ravensworth Asylum will do that to a person. It wasn't just the madness in the patient's eyes, the real clinical madness that medication barely dulled it was the other thing. The thing that moved in the shadows, whispered from empty wards, and occasionally, she swore, pressed cold fingers against the glass of the observation windows. When she finally retired at 65, Agnes expected peace. A quiet cottage in upstate New York, her prize-winning hydrangeas, and silence. But what she got was the echo of Ravensworth. Her first nightmare came a week after her last shift. She was back in Ward C, the violent wing. The air was thick with the scent of industrial bleach and unwashed fear. The patients in their restraints stared at her with wide, pleading eyes. But it wasn't them she feared. It was the empty bed in room 13. She knew that room. It had been empty for decades. They said a patient named Alara Vance, a young woman deemed incurably catatonic, after seeing something beyond the veil, had simply vanished from that bed one night in 1950. Agnes didn't believe in ghosts, but room 13 had always been colder, heavier. In the dream, a thin, pale hand slowly emerged from under the empty bed. Its fingers were impossibly long, skeletal, and twitching. Agnes woke up screaming, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Part 2. Shadows followed. Days turned into weeks, and the nightmares intensified. The visions began to bleed into her waking hours. While she was tending to her hydrangeas, she would see a figure in a white gown watching her from behind the rose bushes. Out of the corner of her eye, when she turned, there was only the wind. One evening, while watching the news, the anchor's face flickered. For a split second, his features melted into the face of a patient Agnes remembered vividly. Mr. Abernathy. He was a man who claimed a dark entity lived inside the walls of Ravensworth, whispering secrets that no human should know. He had eventually clawed out his own eyes to try and unsee it. She started seeing patterns, flickering lights, inexplicable cold spots in her cozy living room, and a faint, metallic smell of old blood that wafted from her empty guest room. It was all too familiar. It was the asylum. It had followed her home. Part 3. The patient in the mirror. Sleep became a torment. In one particularly vivid dream, she was back in room 13. This time, Alara Vance was lying on the bed. Her eyes were wide open, staring at the ceiling. But her pupils were moving, tracking something invisible that crawled across the rafters. "They took my eyes," Alara whispered, her voice like dry leaves skittering on pavement. "But I still see them. They're here, nurse. They're all around us." Agnes woke in a cold sweat. She stumbled to the bathroom to splash water on her face, but when she looked into the mirror, she let out a strangled gasp. For a heartbeat, she didn't see her own tired, aged face. She saw the vacant, terrified stare of Alara Vance looking back at her. The asylum hadn't just haunted her, memories had infected her. Part 4. The whispers returned. Agnes began talking to herself. Little murmurs at first, then full, frantic sentences. She paced her house at night, checking the locks on the doors and windows, convinced that the things Mr. Abernathy spoke of were now pressing against her own walls. One afternoon, she heard a child's laughter. It was thin, ethereal, coming from the empty garden shed in her backyard. She knew there were no children for miles. She walked toward the shed, her pulse thundering in her ears. The laughter grew louder, turning into a high-pitched, rhythmic giggle. When she peered through the crack in the door, she saw nothing but dust motes. But in that moment, a breath, icy and foul, ghosted over her ear. "You let us out, nurse," a child's voice whispered directly into her mind. "When you left Ravensworth, you left the door open, and we followed you home." Part 5. Welcome home. A few days later, a neighbor named Sarah came to check on Agnes. The house was dark, the hydrangeas were wilting, and the mail was piling up. Sarah knocked. No answer. She peered through the living room window. Agnes was sitting in her armchair, staring blankly at the television. The screen was nothing but white, no static. Her eyes were wide, utterly vacant, fixed on the flickering gray light. Her hands were clasped in her lap, twitching faintly in a rhythmic, unnatural way. "Agnes," Sarah called through the glass. Agnes slowly turned her head. A faint, knowing smile played on her lips. It wasn't the grandmotherly smile Sarah knew. It was thin, predatory, and far too wide for her face. In her eyes, Sarah didn't see warmth. She saw a vast, chilling emptiness that mirrored the static on the screen. And as Sarah backed away, a faint, barely audible chorus of tiny, joyous voices drifted from the house on the breeze. They seemed to be singing, "Welcome home, nurse." Agnes Periwinkle had finally found peace. The kind of peace the patients of Ravensworth knew so well. The kind that comes when you are finally, truly, never alone again.